right, hello. So my name is Dana Wojnarowski, and I'm honored to be one of the community co-chairs for Unite U-46. My two daughters are currently students at Hawk Hollow Elementary. And as you may know, our district, like many other districts, faces challenges and opportunities as we plan for the future. And that's why we're here tonight. The purpose of Unite U-46 is to come together as a community to study these challenges and these opportunities, search out solutions, and together develop a plan and make recommendations that are best for our schools, our community, and our kids. Your opinions and ideas are needed now more than ever. We're counting on your suggestions and your recommendations. That's why we are here, to come together as a community through the course of the Unite U-46 process to provide specific guidance, direction, and recommendations for next steps. It is my pleasure to introduce our other co-chairs. We have Veronica Medrano, Amber Peters, who are joining me in person this evening, and we have Shonda Schwartz, who is leading our virtual session tonight. The facilitating team is made up of several respected members of our community and members of the U-46 staff and leadership. We will meet on a regular basis to provide coordination and leadership throughout this Unite U-46 process. At this time, I would like to ask our team members to stand and be recognized. So anyone on that facilitating team? I know many of them are still out and about in the building. Thank you. So while this team is responsible for putting this program together, I want to emphasize that decisions will be made at these community engagement sessions just like this one. This team has created the process, but it will be up to the community to develop the plan and the recommendations that will be presented. So let's go ahead and take a look at our goals for our process. The board has given us a charge to drive our work tonight and to drive the Unite U-46 process. You will find a copy of that full charge in your packets tonight in those folders. If you are joining us virtually, you will see that charge on your welcome link. We have extras available if for some reason you don't have one at your seat tonight. So if we take a look at our charge is rooted in the district's goal to develop an educational facilities master plan that supports student achievement and academic success. The board recognized that a key component of the development and implementation of this plan is community collaboration and involvement, which of course is why we're all here. There are two main components of this charge. First is to learn, review, and understand the challenges and opportunities facing our schools and our school buildings. Then we will use that information and the information we learn, and we're going to work together through our community engagement sessions to develop recommendations that build upon these opportunities and overcome the challenges that are facing our schools. So, fortunately, we're not starting from scratch. Our work will be the culmination of facility planning efforts that started back in 2018 with a vision from the Board of Education. The vision had many elements, including ensuring dynamic core instruction in every classroom, providing every student a device, and better addressing the social emotional needs of our students. The board also recognized that our enrollment was declining and that many of our school buildings were going to need improvements to meet the needs of our students today and in the future. Then in 2020, with more than 50 buildings to assess, the district hired the architectural firm DLR to develop an educational facilities master plan. DLR has worked with hundreds of school districts on similar projects around the world. Through this process, the architects talked with students, staff, and the community. They conducted hundreds of site visits and took a deep dive into the functionality and condition of each of our buildings. Then in 2021, They presented their findings in an in-depth review and analysis that includes recommendations on how to best use the facilities we have, how to use existing buildings and land to implement middle school and pre-K, and retiring and repurposing and rebuilding some of our schools. So now here in 2022, our district action plan to figure out which portions should be implemented and how here in U-46. This action plan was presented to the board this past January and included the formation of a large-scale community engagement plan, which is what has become Unite U-46. So what does that mean for us here and now? Specifically, over the next few months, we're going to look at the vision of the Board of Education to close, rebuild, repurpose, or remodel our oldest elementary school buildings, move to a true middle school model with grades 6 through 8, and expand pre-K programming in our district. The long-term challenges regarding facility maintenance and repair, including providing cost-effective and functional spaces to accommodate the district strategies for curriculum and instruction, how buildings impact student performance, current enrollment projections and how they impact long-range facility planning, and the DLR Educational Facility Master Plan recommendations and timeline presented to the Board of Education on January 24th, 2022. Then, together as a U-46 community, we will develop recommendations, including how we can best support our students as we transition to middle school and district-wide pre-K. Though we will not be looking at individual building boundaries, we will work to develop a plan for how we can best support students through a future redistricting process, knowing that the district needs to find a way to most effectively use its buildings. We will also focus on prioritizing building improvements and offer input regarding the recommendations to retire, rebuild, or repurpose some of our school buildings, when these building improvements should happen, and finally, how we can fund these improvements. Again, we really appreciate your partnership and your collaboration as we begin this process to work toward to make these goals a reality for our students. I'm going to go ahead and introduce Amber, who is our additional community co-chair.
Thank you, Dana. I'm Amber Peters. I am the Executive Director of Elgin Partnership for Early Learning, which is the early childhood collaboration in our community. So I want to take a few minutes to review how our community engagement sessions will work tonight and through the rest of the time. These are just like everyone come kind of meetings, right? So in the South, I'd say y'all come. So we want everybody to come. If you're looking around the room and you don't see your friend or your neighbor, then get them for the next meeting and bring them. I was going to tell you to take them to Dairy Queen afterwards, but we have snacks, so you don't need to do that. We'll provide the snacks. Just get your friends here. It's great that so many of you have come in person tonight. Many more have signed up. I understand that there was going to be about 300 people online attending the first session. So hello to our friends online. Tonight, following the informational presentation, we'll work in small groups. As you came down the hall, you probably saw that there was a room set up. So we'll transition to that room for the work session. Groups will start to process developing recommendations for moving our district forward. On the screen is the agenda, and it will be followed, what will be followed at each meeting. Each session will start with an informational presentation, followed by a small group work activity. And then each group will give a short report summarizing their input on the presentation. It's important that you note that these sessions are not structured as an open forum or a debate. They're a work session focused on results and collecting collective decisions as a group. What you do is you'll have a sheet. that's like this. If you have any questions, you're welcome to put that. We'll be collecting those. And you'll also have a sheet in the work session that your group will refer to and we'll talk about at the end. Following each session, a series of documents will be developed to record your work and the information learned. We know your time is very valuable, so I appreciate Dana starting right at 7 o'clock because we are going to have you out of here by 9 and hopefully before then. Each of our meetings will feature a topic to discuss in your work session that you're able to offer feedback. Tonight, we begin with an orientation of the community engagement process, followed by a short overview of the challenges and opportunities facing the district facilities. Throughout the spring, we'll take a deep dive into some key topics that you see listed here. Depending on the availability of our presenters, these topics may shift, but that information will be online if they have to do any shifting so that you will know that. In the fall, we will get an inside look at a school building, think field trip, which is always fun, and develop recommendations. We know that you may not be able to attend each session, but please try to attend as many as possible because your collective voice matters. During each session, there's going to be a lot of information that's going to be covered in a short period of time, and we know your time's valuable. So we want to honor the 2-hour commitment for each meeting. So it's important that you not interrupt the presenter with questions. That's where you can use your green sheet to write your questions down. The presenter and the members of the facilitating team will be circulating the room and around the tables, available to answer questions during our small group work session. We request that you respect our plan and procedure for questions and answers. There may be a question that you have or a question that may arise in your group that is directly related to or not related to the topic we are just studying. On each table, you can use that sheet for the questions. If you're joining us virtually, there's a link on the online section. I have a question form that you can use to fill out those questions. Information, included presentations, meeting materials, and more will be posted on the district's website. Help us spread the word on social media to get more people involved. You can see on the screen different ways for social media that you can like us on Facebook, follow on Twitter, or put in questions for Let's Talk. I think you're really going to like tonight's presentation. First, we're going to hear from our superintendent, Dr. Tony Sanders, regarding some important facts and figures that our district, and some that are simply fascinating, I thought. And when you have, and then you'll have a chance to work at the table in the other room, discussing what you've heard and what other topics you feel are important to develop the recommendations. So without further ado, I welcome Dr. Tony Sanders.
Thank you, Amber. Appreciate it. And I cannot thank you all enough for being here this evening. It sounds like, should I move this up just a little bit, or can you guys hear me okay? Wonderful. It's an honor to have you all here. In addition to most of you are members of our community. You're all members of our community. But I know we also, in addition to having members of our community, some of you also work for U-46. So if you work for U-46, in addition to being a resident, can you please stand up so we can recognize you? If you also work for U-46, can we give our residents and workers a round of applause? Throughout each session, in addition to your participation, we will always have Board of Education members with us. We have board member John Devereaux, who is with us here this evening. He's on the Board of Education. Board member Melissa Owens is joining with us throughout this process as well. She's the board vice president. And on Zoom, we have over 200 participants this evening, including board members who are observing, but trying to maintain and ensure we do not violate the Open Meetings Act by having more than 3 board members at any one session. So you're going to see not all board members at one time, because that would be considered or could be construed as a violation of the law. So that's why you don't see them all at the same time. It is so great to stand before you, not only as a superintendent of U-46, but as a former and still kind of current parent. My kids all went through U-46. We moved to U-46 in 2007 due to all the opportunities that were afforded in this district. My kids went through, my daughter attended Otter Creek. My son went to Creekside. He was in what was then the SWAS program. Kimball, Abbott, and then they both graduated from Larkin High School. So not only, I'm proud to say my kids went through U-46 schools. If you know anything about U-46, if you work in U-46 or you've been a member of our Community Advisory Council, some of the information you hear tonight may be a little bit boring. So I'm just warning you, if you start to fall asleep, we have members of the audience who will come by and kick you, all right? So we wanted to start at the 30,000 foot level and assume, not make any assumptions that people knew anything about U-46. So if you're here and you don't know anything about U-46, this session is perfect for you. If you know everything there is to know about U-46, hopefully you'll walk away with some new information, but it's really going to be at a high level. So we're going to discuss our enrollment trends as a school district, some of our finances. We'll give a quick overview of some of our financial summaries, some of the key challenges that we have moving forward, and we'll talk a little bit more about the vision that the Board of Education set for the district, including the middle school model, equitable access for all elementary schools, and then also expanding preschool opportunities across the district. In case you did not know, U-46 spans 11 different communities, 90 square miles, which is approximately the size of the city of Seattle. The communities that we serve, I'm not going to read them all off, but predominantly we have Elgin, South Elgin, portions, a very small portion of St. Charles. All of Bartlett is within U-46, Hanover Park, Carroll Stream, Streamwood, West Chicago, and Hoffman Estates, to name a few. We, again, the 90 square miles sounds big, but in compared to other school districts across the state that are much larger in square mileage, we're actually not as large as many of the other school districts in the state. We have 57 schools serving the state's being the state's second largest school district. Currently, we have 36,000 students, and among our student population, 103 different languages are spoken in the homes of U-46 students. A little bit of history, School District U-46, our first building ever built was in 1846. The first graduating class from Elgin High School were 8 female students, which is kind of a fun fact that you might not have known. Again, we have 57 plus buildings currently. If you were to add up the square footage of all of our buildings, it would be the comparison of 14 Soldier Fields. If you're not a Bears fan, sorry, that's the best comparison I have for you. We didn't compare it to anything in Green Bay, sorry. Here's our enrollment trends. Over the last few years, we have seen a declining enrollment across our student body. I'll talk a little bit more of the reasons for that here in just a few minutes, but overall, you can see year over year, since 2014, we peaked out and we've been slowly declining by several hundred students every year, 300 to 400 students a year that we lose. The reason for the declining enrollment is the declining birth rate. So this gives you the birth rate. This is just U-46 zip codes and the birth rate across our zip codes for the last few years. And if you want to go back, you can see how closely it ties to the declining enrollments of the school district. This is not a unique phenomenon for the U-46. It's happening across the state of Illinois where there's been a decline in birth rates, and most of the country with the exception of a few states. If you want to look at our enrollment by grade level or grade band, you can see the most dramatic drop. Again, this highlights the impact of the drop in birth rates. You can see where it's really impacted our elementary buildings as incoming kindergarten classes are a lot smaller, and year over year they progress through the system, while middle schools maintain relatively flat. And right now we're seeing the peak of our high school students currently exiting our system. So this will be, as you can see from the chart, one of the largest graduating classes that we have going through U-46. Over the next few years, we will see our enrollment drop to around 32,000 students is the projection, and likely maintain there for the foreseeable future. I have to note, within this data, things can change, right? Economies can change, enrollments can change dramatically with new developments. And right now there are several new developments happening across the district. And it can also change if there's a suddenly people start selling their homes and new families move in. So certainly it could change very rapidly like it did in the early 2000s. In terms of U-46 finances, first of all, let me just ask a question. Does anybody here remember times when U-46 faced bad financial times? By show of hands? Yes? Okay. I know when I first moved to U-46, we faced a $40 million deficit. It's not something we should shy away from. As I stand before you tonight, the Board of Education has really committed to being good stewards of taxpayer dollars. And as I stand before you, not only are we in a healthy financial position, the board is insisting by policy that we maintain 20% of our funds in reserve, but we currently have a $399 million balance in the bank at this moment in time. Isn't that great? Thank you for kicking off the applause. That's awesome. I'm very proud of that too. I think it's great that we've been able to get to where we are today. And a lot of it, I'm just going to pause and reflect, was a result of a change in state law regarding the state's funding formula that our board really took an active role in fighting for, that has been transformational for our school district. Currently, you can see where most of our revenues come from. Most of it comes from your local property taxes. This state evidence-based funding formula continues to fund about 32% of our district. Across the large unit districts in the state, of which U-46 is one of them, we are the furthest from adequacy from state funding of any of the large unit districts. So we're always going to be continue pushing for additional state revenues. But like most school districts, local property taxes continue to be the #1 thing that provides us a resource for your students. In terms of I want to make one other note here real quick. Our federal aid this year is higher than what you would see in most typical years because we've received a lot of federal funding through all the different federal CARES Act dollars that came through the federal government this last couple of years. Typically, our federal aid would be significantly lower than that, probably 8 to 10%. In terms of budgeted expenditures, salaries and benefits, we are a people-driven business. If it were not for our teachers and our paraeducators and our bus drivers and our principals, we would not be able to open our doors. So we are heavily, most districts will spend 70 to 80% of their budget on people, salaries and benefits. This year, again, due to the ESSER dollars coming in, our percentage for salaries and benefits looks a little bit skewed because purchase services increased significantly. So one of the things that you'll see happening if you're a parent, you know that your child has access to a bunch of summer opportunities. Those are purchase services where we reach agreements with local municipalities and others to provide those services. And that's why purchase services is up a little bit higher than normal, while our salary and benefits look a little bit lower this year. Recently, our Board of Education, I said they've tried to be really good stewards of your taxpayer dollars. We've gone out and refinanced several bonds. To put into perspective, does anybody know what a bond is? Yes? Okay. For those of you that might not be aware, think of it as your home loan. When we were building buildings back in the early 2000s up through 2005, South Elgin High School and Kenyon Woods would be the most recent schools we built. We had to take out loans, and for school districts, they're considered bonds. When those bonds come due, we make payments on those annually, just like you make payments on your mortgage. Those are directly billed to you as the taxpayer on your tax bill. It doesn't actually come out of our levy for taxing purposes. So as good stewards of your dollars, the board, as interest rates were dropping, would refinance those bonds. And that way you would be saving money on your tax bill. So when last time we went out to do a bond refinance, we were upgraded in our financial status from S&P from a AA- to a AA rating, which is a really good rating if you know anything about the market. We also, since 2012, have been rated excellent by the State Board of Education for our financial position. So that leads to the big question about tax rates. You hear a lot about the taxes, and we know that taxes are for your school districts in any community are the biggest bill that you have on your tax bill. We wanted to give you some comparisons to our other Kane County school districts so that you could see where we fare in terms of our tax rate. Currently, School District U-46, we're a little over, getting close to 6%, but under 5% tax rate. Whereas you can see some of our neighboring districts. It's cut off, so I'll just give you a few examples. A few of the districts that actually have higher tax rate include Hinckley, Geneva School District, Batavia, Sycamore School District, Oswego, Yorkville, Central School District 301, that's Burlington area, and Canelan Community Unit School District. A few that have slightly lower or close to U-46 include Huntley, West Aurora, District 300, and St. Charles, or a little bit to the left. And then the lowest that you see there are Barrington Public Schools and East Aurora. I would note Barrington Public Schools passed a referendum a year ago, so you're going to start seeing theirs jump back up again here before long, and they'll be back up around where we are. So moving our facilities forward. Some of the challenge, you've heard a little bit about these earlier. We have aging facilities across U-46. I'll show you some examples here in a few minutes. But some of our facilities truly no longer meet the needs of our students and need to be replaced. We also recognize that as we did not have enough money as a school district in the past, there are things where we've deferred maintenance on buildings and that we need to invest more on an annual basis in our operation and maintenance of our buildings. We know we have uneven capacity across in utilization across our schools. So if you're an elementary parent, any elementary school parents here, so you know if you're in portions of like on the west side of Elgin, our schools are really packed. They're compact. There's not enough room typically to lower class sizes much because we're out of classroom space. There's other portions of the district where the buildings are about 50% currently enrolled. We have program placement because of the fact that we have space in some areas of the district and not in others. We place programs based on where we have space. So if you have a special needs student, just for an example, they may end up going to school in Bartlett, even though you live in Elgin. So every day, if you go back to the slide that has our boundaries and you go to the far upper west, northwest side of Elgin, we have students who get on a bus at Century Oaks Elementary School and ride that bus to Bartlett every day for services, and then make that same trip home every day. And the reason why is because we don't have room in Elgin, but we do have room for programs in Bartlett. And so that's one of the things that we know that we need to address. The other obstacle to our plan is that we have no current middle school in the southern portion of our boundary area. I'll show you that here in a minute. We've had limited preschool opportunities based on wherever we could find space. Currently, we even lease space for preschool opportunities. We lease a building on the west side of Elgin to help provide some additional pre-K space. And we also partner with other organizations like One Hope United that gives that leases a space for pre-K opportunities. And so we know the aggregate of that is inequitable access for all students. So the board recognized this again, and this is a repeat. In 2018, pre-pandemic, the board recognized this through a visioning process. I'm not going to read to you all the elements that the board put on their vision. Certainly it's in your PowerPoint deck. You can read it at your leisure. But some of the things that they pointed out within their vision was that they really wanted us to look at our oldest elementary schools to either be closed, rebuilt, or remodeled, and to launch a true middle school model. So if we say we have a middle school model in U-46, we call our schools middle schools, regardless of our 8 schools are considered middle schools, but they're not. They're technically junior highs when they're just grade 7 and 8. We really want to move to a true middle school model of grades 6, 7, and 8. And then in doing so, that opens up space in our elementary buildings to be able to expand our opportunities for students to have access to pre-K. So that was the board's vision back in 2018. So from 2020 to 2021, we hired an outside firm. It's an architectural firm called DLR. You'll be hearing from them at a future presentation. They did an in-depth analysis of all of our 57 schools and facilities across the district and presented an educational facilities master plan to the district. If you have time, I really encourage you to visit our website. You can look at every single school that they visited. You can see how that school fared, how they graded that school, what are the challenges for that school. So if you want to know more details about individual schools, including your own children's school, please take an opportunity to look at that website. Based on the DLR feedback, again, we presented a plan to the board in January of 2022. And that included moving towards this continuing this vision that the board had earlier. So the first piece of the vision, again, was moving sixth grade to middle school. And the reason why, again, it's better curriculum alignment. When you look at the curriculum for elementary school from the Common Core State Standards or the Illinois standards, elementary curriculum is grades pre-K through fifth. A middle school curriculum is grades 6, 7, and 8. So when kids in sixth grade are not exposed to a true middle school model, they're missing out on a lot of opportunities that they would have in a middle school model. And so instead, sixth graders typically, anybody have sixth graders? Any parents of sixth graders in the room? Okay, so do your kids perhaps, well, I won't get into question and answer. Sometimes you might see the teaming where the two or three sixth grade teachers might split up subjects to make it feel more like a middle school. But at the end of the day, sixth graders belong in an environment where they're being exposed to multiple courses throughout the day, where math is more specialized, English language arts is more specialized, and so forth. So for that reason, we knew we needed to identify a location for a 9th middle school. You're going to learn more about this, by the way, on May 25th. So mark your calendars for that community engagement session. And as we looked at where our current schools were located relative to where kids live, we found that there was a big area down here in the district, in the Bartlett area, where we were lacking a middle school, where kids were actually on a bus for quite some ways. If you live down in this area of Bartlett, you're either on a bus going to Kenyon Woods or to Eastview, which is quite a distance. So we began looking at schools that we could use to repurpose to make into a middle school. And we determined that the best opportunity would be Hawk Hollow Elementary School. And the rationale for that is not only does it have, it has adequate space to be turned into a middle school, it's got plenty of land, it's got room across the street where we own property for soccer fields and other athletic purposes. And it's the only school in that area that has that available space to actually expand and make it an acceptable middle school for our students. So again, achieving trying to provide a more equitable experience for all of our elementary students. As DLR did their research, you can see the variety across our buildings. And we'll talk about some of our buildings from the late 1800s, but we have buildings from 1880s all the way to 2005 for our elementary students, with a variety of structures and a variety of grades that they all deserve in terms of how they best serve kids. We know that our move to this will require us to consider retiring some buildings. It'll include some boundary changes for students as we move forward. And we also know that as we do the boundary changes, as I talked about earlier, our program placements, we need to make sure we place programs first based on where kids live, not based on where we have space. So these are the 4 oldest buildings in U-46. I wish I could do a quiz and see if anybody knew which ones they were. But McKinley, Lowry, and Garfield are our 3 oldest elementary schools, being built in 1887. They were originally built without plumbing or electricity. We were able to add that last year. Oh, you guys are listening. Good. I'm glad you're listening. No, but seriously, they were built originally without plumbing. These 3 schools continue to be a challenge to maintain and upgrade. Lowry recently, this school year, had a major plumbing issue where we had to dig down, and they found 2 different subfloors below the original building that they had to dig through to try to find floors that we didn't even have on plans anywhere, that we didn't even know existed. And then Washington Elementary School was built in 1893. That was the first elementary school built with electricity and indoor plumbing. We also know one of the challenges will be our space utilization moving forward. So as we flash forward to 2026, if our boundaries remain the same and everything remains static, this is what it would look like in U-46 based on our projected enrollments. So red means that a school is pretty much over-enrolled, that you're at or above the number of students that you can adequately fit in the school. Blue means you're really good. You're either under capacity, and you can see the variety. Up in the Elgin area, you can see pretty condensed, very hard to find space in the Elgin area as we move forward all the way across the west side of Elgin, the South Elgin region with Clinton, Otter Creek, Nature Ridge and Bartlett, Sycamore Trails, and up in Streamwood at Glenbrook, Lincoln, and others, while others are a little bit under enrolled. So we know that we need to address boundaries by 2026. I talked earlier about the facilities index, and again, you can explore this more on the district website. This is one example of a school that we are going to be recommending for complete tear down and replacement, and that's Century Oaks Elementary School. Back in the days, we had several buildings built at the same time, and I like to refer to them as the Millennium Falcon. If you can picture the Millennium Falcon in your mind, it's a big circle with basically these schools look like the Millennium Falcon with a big circle in the middle, which is the common area, the library. And then they have these little Trivial Pursuit piece pie shaped classrooms coming off of the library where students have to walk through each other's classroom to get to their classroom. It's a bizarre setup. It is noisy. It's really difficult if you're a teacher or a student to really concentrate based on the configuration of the school. And we have 3 buildings that are very similar to Century Oaks. Century Oaks on our overall scale ended up, I believe, at a C+. Is that correct? Overall C+. But if you look at their spatial educational adequacy on the report card, they're a D. For building allocation, which is the gross square footage per pupil, they were graded as an F. Facility condition is a C. Water usage is a D. And energy consumption is a D on the overall rating. So again, those are some of the factors we take into consideration when making recommendations to the board. So to continue to meet the board's vision, we need to evaluate, again, the need to renovate, replace, or decommission schools in order to free up space for pre-K. We're going to have a lot more on this at our community engagement session on May 25th. So again, mark your calendar for that one. So why would we want to expand pre-K opportunities? A few years ago in 2014, we started the process of adding full-day kindergarten. We launched that in 2015 because we know the value of early childhood education, especially for students who in a community that's as low income as U-46. Nothing beats a strong early childhood program, and we know that we would like to offer that for every student who comes through our doors. Not only is it good for the children, it's good for selling U-46 as a district. Wouldn't you want to move to a district that offered early childhood opportunities for every kid that walks in the doors? I see a lot of nodding heads. Thank you for nodding. So it's a great investment. Everybody recognizes it. The state's continuing their investment in early childhood. It's an opportunity for us to really give kids early interventions. It's an opportunity for teachers to collaborate. And as we are looking at the different models available for early childhood, by trying to offer it at the local home school, one of the impediments if you have had a child in U-46 is we only currently offer one-way transportation for most early childhood classrooms. So if you're a family, it's a real challenge for you to be able to get your child one way, don't only have one-way transportation, but that's the best we've been able to do and afford for our kids. By moving the school's early childhood opportunities within our home schools means that more kids can have access within a 1.5 miles of their home. That means moms and dads can drive their kid. If they have older siblings, perhaps the children can walk with siblings, but it opens up a world of opportunities. So moving forward, we're starting the transition already to the middle school model. Hawk Hollow will be in its final year this upcoming year as an elementary school. Students, we've already brought forward to the board a boundary change proposal that they'll vote on at the next board meeting that will have students that are in Hawk Hollow effective in the 2023-24 school year going to either Prairie View if they're north of Army Trail Road or to Spring Trail if they're south of Army Trail Road. So that is already underway. We know that district-wide we don't have enough space to move all students to middle school, and we are funding this through our reserves. So again, I mentioned earlier that we're in a strong financial footing. We're able to do this out of our current reserves. So the plan, I think I already addressed all of those. So I'll just skip that one. So here are some of the things that we're going to be needing your input on. This is a repeat from earlier, but I can't overemphasize it. We're going to need your input on, as we consider replacing buildings, as we consider the move to middle school, we're going to need transition space. That means that as buildings are considered for closing, students are going to have to, so for example, Century Oaks, if we're going to close and rebuild Century Oaks, we're going to have to find space for them to go for a year, for those students to go while their school is demolished and rebuilt. That's what transition space means. It means finding a space for the kids to go while their building's being rebuilt. Retire, I will tell you, we argued a lot about the term retire. We used to call it decommission, but we've been convinced that the term retire, and the key term here is that the building has reached the end of its useful life. So if you're retired, don't take it to mean that you've reached the end of your useful life. But for a building, it means you reach the end of your useful life and the site is no longer ideal based on enrollment trends. And that holds true for some of our oldest buildings. Replace means that we would replace the entire building. And finally, addition and updates are things that we can do as a district without going to referendum. That's why Hawk Hollow we're able to do. It's an addition to a building. It's not a replacement. So overall, here's what we're going to be looking to do. Some of the schools that we're looking to completely be retired and taken offline include Garfield Elementary School. That's one of the oldest schools in the district. We would look to use it potentially for transition space for some of the other schools that would be being rebuilt, and have those students then redo the boundaries so that they would attend either Channing or Huff. Hanover Countryside also is a building that we would be looking to use as transition space. And then, for example, as we rebuilt Glenbrook, have the students attend Hanover Countryside for a year while we're rebuilding Glenbrook. And then when Glenbrook reopens, we would have those kids go to either Glenbrook or Oak Hill, depending on the boundary changes. Illinois Park is our early learning center that sits at the corner of McLean and Wing Street. If you've ever been over there, it's a traffic nightmare. On days when kids are being picked up, there's a line of cars down the street, and it's just not a safe environment for kids to be being picked up or dropped off at. That's why it was closed once before. That's why we're recommending closing it once again. And at the same time, I mentioned that we lease space called More at 4 on McLean Avenue that we'd be looking to also no longer have to lease. Schools that would be looking to completely to either update or rebuild include Lowry Elementary School, again, one of the older elementary schools that we know we need. McKinley is an elementary school that we know we're going to need. We need a building in that area. So we'd be looking to rebuild those two, we call them the old girls. Washington, no, I didn't come up with the term. But they are old buildings. Washington Elementary School has a unique charm about it. It is still a really viable building, so we would be looking to do some additions or some updates to Washington, but keep it because of its historic nature. It really is a historic building. Glenbrook, Century Oaks, and Parkwood are those Millennium Falcon style of schools that I referenced earlier, that when you go and take a look at them, and when we do a site tour, you're going to see how inadequate these spaces are for children. We're looking to completely tear those sites down and rebuild them from scratch. And I see a lot of nodding heads. So you people that know those schools, they're horrible. If you've been inside of them, they're not, it's just not a good space for children to be in. So those are the plans for the schools to be updated or rebuilt. So the things I need you to take away from tonight, and as you go out into your sessions to have more discussion, again, don't forget we have the question cards, we have the materials with you, and we need your feedback. But the biggest takeaways tonight, again, that we have declining enrollments across U-46, which means that we should be keeping up with that by closing some buildings, that we do have an aging infrastructure that we're needing to maintain, that we have uneven utilization across our sites, that we need to move to this new middle school model and open up space for pre-K, because I think we all agree that preschool is really important, and mostly that we need your input. And I'm so glad that you all came here and you've committed. I'm glad that you're going to stay and participate for every session moving forward. We are going to get your signatures in blood on the way out. And for those of you on Zoom, thank you for participating, and please continue to come with us whether you're on Zoom. Feel free to come to future meetings. We'll continue to offer this opportunity, but we would love to have you in person to be a part of these conversations. And we will still engage you in Zoom land. But we wish you could be here for the snacks, because the snacks are really good, right, folks? And with that, I will now hand it back over to our co-chair, Veronica.
Let's give a round of applause to Mr. Sanders for all the amazing information. Who learned something today? A lot of people. So I hope even if you're at home, you learned something and you're raising your hand. I know we can't see you, but your kids can. So thank you for joining us again. So now we're going to move into our participation portion of our meeting today, which is why we invited all of you guys to come out today. Kind of like Amber said, we're going to have group sessions where we're going to discuss all of the information that we just learned about today. For all of those of you who are in person, we're going to move into a different room. For all of the people that are virtual, you're going to move into what is called the breakout rooms. And so in those breakout rooms, we're going to go over through some instructions before we get started. Okay. When we move at each table, we're going to have two people who we're going to need you guys to step up virtually and in person. Okay. We're going to need a recorder and a facilitator. So for our virtual people, we're going to need the same thing. We need your help. So the recorder is responsible for completing the worksheet. In person, we're going to have an orange worksheet, which we are going to fill out. That is the official form of your group. That is the consensus. If it's not written in there, we don't know. We don't think that you said anything about it. So it has to be officially on the form so that we can take that feedback and give it to the district. Virtually, you will get a link and you guys will fill it out there. But that sheet is very, very important. That is your feedback that you share with us. So make sure you complete that. Online, it'll be in the box in the upper right hand corner. And now the facilitator is going to facilitate the discussion in your group. So those of you guys who came in person, you have a number. You're going to go to those tables. We're going to need a facilitator for each table. And they are going to make sure that you guys are focused on the work that we ask for you to fill out and make sure that we complete it on time so that we can get out of here promptly at 9 o'clock, or like Amber said, a little bit earlier. And so we need you guys to keep everybody on track, make sure that you guys are answering those questions that we have for you. And then we are able to report back the results. Initially, we were going to share the information with those on Zoom. We were going to share it with everybody here and vice versa. But because there's a lot of people, we're going to, if you're in person, you're going to share the feedback with the people in person. If you're virtual, you're going to share the information with the people online. Okay. So make sure that the recorder records the information on the group's worksheet, and it's going to reflect again the general consensus of your group. Make sure it's not just one person's opinion. Make sure it's everybody in your group's opinion. We want to make sure everybody's voice is heard. And then we're going to ask you to please monitor the time and make sure that you get everything done on time, and then we'll start reporting out again. And so it's very important that if you are virtual, you submit the form. And if you are in person, we need those papers back. So do not leave with them, okay? And then that'll be that. So we're gonna ask for you to fill out really two questions that we need the feedback on. The first question is gonna be, based on the information that you learned tonight, what is your group's biggest surprise or concern about U-46? So all of you guys raised your hands. You guys learned something. What were you more surprised by? Or what were you like excited to learn about U-46? And next, we want to know what your group thinks is more important to learn about and discuss as you continue our Unite U-46 process. Okay, so once you determine your topics, please rank each topic as high, medium, or low priority. We will focus on those. And then starting with your group's top priority, let us know what key questions or comments you would like addressed within that area. For our virtual participants, we will now be sending you a link for our techie people in your breakout rooms. And remember, you will need to select your facilitator and your recorder for those breakout rooms as well. And if you have any questions, you can leave the breakout room and come back into our session, and somebody will be there to help you out. Within our groups, we will be standing around answering any questions you guys might have. And so now it's time for us to break out, and we're going to start our our discussions. We are going to be going, if you are the, if you are the spokesperson within your group, please gather all of your work activity, all of your questions. We are gonna have a sign-in sheet and we are gonna have question forms that we're gonna get in the front of the auditorium. We're gonna collect from you guys. Everyone else may grab a seat anywhere. So we're gonna actually move. If you have a number, make sure you take it with you. Everybody, we're gonna leave in person. We're gonna take all of your stuff because we're not gonna come back into this room. We're gonna go into the work area. Everybody in virtual, you're just gonna break out and then the techie people have it online. Thank you.
Okay, so those joining